We are going, Sven, but I have to intro us. Welcome back, sports fans. Sven Martin, I've woken him up after a long few days in Fort William. This is going to be your Crank Brothers race review series where myself and a selected few co hosts will break down each World Cup DH race from the season. What a race it was. Fort William always delivers. Now, Crank Brothers are synonymous with downhill racing, celebrating 30 years in a row with that elite world champs win with a mallet DH pedal, i.e., last year in Fort William, it was world champs. Now they've got a whole host of podium contenders and race winners because they've been adding to their product offering in their shoes. People like Lucas Shaw, Troy Brosnan, both on the podium. Camille Belange coming back from injury on the podium. Benoit Coulange, not his best race, but we're going to hear why and what else was going on. Sven Martin, how are we doing considering you are on running on fumes, lack of sleep as per usual?
Um, yeah, I actually going to be probably the most useless co-host slash what do you call this position? Insider, because I was there. I literally it happens. It takes it's all over in a blur, and I'm trying to remember high points, but they all just mix together. But on the pedals, I almost think we have a women's clean sweep, top five on Crank Brother Daniel pedals, and four of the five on. I think Dakota's maybe the only one not on the pedals, and Benoit on six. And yeah, it's almost like as many people that are on electronic suspension are on Crank Brothers pedals,
It was quite a
which
tech
I'm sure
buzz,
we'll
I
get into.
must. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was quite a tech buzz, but yeah, I mean, we know we've been riding the pedals for years and testing them back in the day. So I'm obviously super proud. And they're a race brand. They so support. I mean, the marketing manager himself, George, is there doing videos. He loves racing. He's always on the road. So that's pretty awesome that they are a part of this podcast. But for us, we were going to sit down and chat anyway. And I was a proper pundit at home. And I watched a lot of tech videos, which I'll be very honest, I don't often do. Now that I'm withdrawn from it, I like the psychology of racing. I like to see who's getting up to what in the off season. We should probably cover Loic Bruni's interesting statements in the press conference at some point. But the tech was pretty heavy this year, and even something as simple as a mullet wheel setup, I didn't expect to see from Greg, you know. Just even that to me is
mm.
quite interesting this year. But yeah, they got flight attendant from Shram. You've got Olin's working on their projects with Loic and Finn now using it. And then you've got something on Umri's bike, which I didn't really dig too much into it, but it's super cool to see that the tech is sort of caught up with the sport in a way like it has in other sports.
Yeah. It literally comes down to marginal gains, and at the top end of the sport, although there was a sort of a big race winning margin, like 1.8 seconds in the men's. But if you look at that semi-final, the top three guys or top four guys are on like less than a tenth of them for two or three of them, and well under a second for four or five of them. So literally, you got these massive technological investments. Again, I mean, can you imagine the units at both RockShox and Fox and Olin's, the R&D and all the stuff sort of that would have say got had to do to develop flight attendant to get it to market. It's massive business units and expenditure, and maybe what it translates to is a second at a big track like Fort William, or a half second, but a half second is literally like can be the difference between winning the series, the world championship, the race. Um, yeah, it's pretty nuts. Part of me wants the sport to be simpler. So for like the customers, it's just cheaper. So you can have a bike for 4 years, and bikes cost half the price that they do, because we've got faster development cycles than motor vehicles and motorcycles and stuff. But then the other half of me, like it's just, especially this elite level racing, it's performance driven, and that all just trickles down to the ultimately to the consumer for choice and performance, and then you get your less expensive trickle down products after that anyway.
And it probably played more of a role with the changing of the track, the start at going straight down They lost a bit of time on the race, straightened a few sections out. So the margins for errors were way less than usual than we've seen at Fort William, and the conditions were pretty fair all round except for semis, which was a bit of a
Yeah.
trickle of rain there. So you can imagine these marginal gains you speak of, I mean, are so much more prevalent here at probably Fort William than many other tracks. Maybe Leogame comes to mind with how vast, varied, the sections are, with the motorway
Yeah.
versus the woods versus the top rocky stuff at Fort William. You've got 3 or 4 different styles of track all rolled into one. And then Leogang, I think you could argue the same, but then other tracks like Maribor, it's pretty similar, characteristics that you're going to go through on the bike. So that was pretty cool. And there were some guys that made up time, or some ladies that made up time in just the motorway section.
Yeah, and it's just the compression of time in general. Both the compression of the top three and top five spread time difference from first to third, or first to fifth, and then the top 10 time difference. How over the evolution of the sport, it's 2002 Kovarik here. So this is 21 years ago. Had, I don't know if it still stands in men's, but the biggest win margin at the first race here. 12 odd seconds, somewhere along that thing. But in both, and it's great because it's actually even more, can be seen more clearly in the women's gap from like first to like like to get top 10, what the time is off the win. And this caught Pompoma, which we can get to in her qualifying run, what she felt was like enough of a time to get her into the semi and the final. But so that gap has just come down, and there will be some tracks where it is a bit longer than others. Like this would be one of them. It just makes it like it's just making the sport that much more gnarly, that much harder. And also, it means there's so few less things that can go wrong. You can't make the little mistake and make up for it. You can't do that in one race, never mind the series, and you can't do that in one, like you have a semi and a qualifier. It's just simply too tight. And unless you one of the lucky protected few, there's a lot of names that didn't race either the semi or didn't race the final. And it's partly just, new names are coming up and others are coming down, but like you get a little bit unlucky and you're not in the semi, or a little bit unlucky and you're not in the final. And it's there's no mistakes, you just got to be, the bike's got to be perfect throughout all sectors, and so do you, and so does the equipment, really.
Yeah, so the storylines we chatted about in the preseason, many of them sort of rung true. But the sad part is what you've just mentioned. So you got Laurie Greenland, Deprella, Hatton. From a Hatton, a Deprella, and I might be missing, it was, and Bernard Kerr, but he was protected. Those riders, minus Laurie, had bad luck twice, which is tough. I mean, that's luck, right? That's not the way the racing is unfolding with semis. But those guys were in the top 15 in quali and then got caught out in semis with crashes or maybe weather, where, with a little bit of rain, where they're a bit more conservative. I was watching the timing going, sure, a lot of these riders are going a little bit slower. Is that fatigue? But it was probably maybe a little bit of rain or a little bit greasy or a little bit of vision, and then, like you mentioned, the time gaps are so small, you're fighting for the top 30 spot, not the top 60. So you can't go, okay, I'm just going to mail it in. Tomorrow's another day. You've got people fighting to get in, like Greg Menard, depending on where he started in quali, he's got to keep it on 2 wheels, but go aggressive enough to be in the top 30 in the world these days, which, as we've spoken ad nauseum, is insane these days. The time gaps are just too small. And then if you're making the tracks technically easier to ride in places, which you are because you're straightening it and they're faster, there's less time gaps that you can put into someone, or you can't make it up. If there's a pretty gnarly section and you feel like you want to be aggressive, you can maybe make up time. But everyone's on the same line. It's fast, there's just less to make up. So that's a little bit of like a challenge, obviously, with the format. And you don't want to see someone like Hatton not there. Deprella was fast in quali, top 10. So that's like a bit of a bummer. And we had the same in the women. You've got like a bunch of women that are like the next crop of riders that are already names that we know, names that the fans know. And you're like, they're not in the final. Like, would they have been able to step it up in the final, you know?
Yeah. You know, we'll get back to the women because it that does give opportunity for people that did do some incredibly hard work to get in the final, like having Michaela and Anna Newkirk qualify so well and bump some of the more well-known women. That was amazing to see. But yeah, we'll talk, like, I guess, about the races separately. But on what we're talking about now, I went to the we backstory is I've got to get a two-leg chariot from Scotland to Italy, and I'm like playing musical chairs with all the teams. Who's doing enduros or who's going to finale? So I've got to had to go to Atherton Racing where I got stuff shipped, and then take that over to Pivot, and then they're going to drive it to finale, and then I get it from finale and get it before we go to Poland. But anyway, long story short is Andy Kolb and I had a good little chat, and it's these little, like, I often find when you're going to talk to someone about something, you're just finding out about that thing, or so you kind of stay sort of focused on thing. But then we just got chatting as I was sort of packing my camera bag, and I was saying how good he was looking, and then he was just filling me in on the status of his sort of return and his injury. He got hurt in Queenstown, and you get a bit more depth. It was just, it's easy to say someone's recovering or riding on injury, and how he was happy yet disappointed because of how strong he was when the injury came at the end of the off season. But he still, I think, got top 10 this weekend. But he was saying, so back on what we're talking about, the tracks the bikes getting so good and the tracks getting sort of simpler and faster, and time gaps shrinking. Andy Kolb said the race that he said he hated the most and he didn't want to have to ride like that was the race he won in Leogang. He said that was like the scariest, and he said it at all times in his run, and he wasn't riding out of control, so don't like mistake that he's riding over his head, but he felt that if he crashed at any point in that run, he was going so fast that it would just result in injury. So at this point, and we're not going to be able to make the riders ride slower, and reality is we're not going to put they're not going to put as many sort of safety bench like sort of chicane turns in as they can do in enduro to slow certain fast sections down. But I guess it just adds an increased onus on track builders and to make sure like the B zones and the tree padding and are especially made safe for the riders, so you don't get like Amaury breaking his back in sawn stumps on the side of the track. So it's really, I know this is like just going all over the place. We're not sticking to racing, but if Andy Kolb, the race winner from Leogang, says, because we're likening the new section of the track where they missed the Schwalbe corner, went sort of straight on this little fast little highway into the new like long river gap. I asked, because the track is so long, a lot of the riders were happy to have a slightly shorter track, but then they also like the smoothest, simplest part of the track was as scary, if not more scary than Sector 2, which has got all the rough, rocky, gnarly tech where you can get caught up and have a massive and you can hit rocks. But there they actually feel less safe for their bodies because you're going so fast past these, like, just you're flying, through these simple sections of woods, and you go slightly off or you slip slightly, then it's over, and you're going to hit something at high speeds, like Jackson did at Hardline or whatever. So if track builders and race organizers listen to this, you just really could work hard on the bits around the track too, please. So the side, yeah. So basically, what were we talking about? But that's
We were talking.
Just an interesting
it's a
aside,
great.
yeah.
That's an awesome, interesting topic. That's why we want to hear from you, Sven. You're at the races, and if you're having a chat to someone like Andy Kolb, I mean, no one's ever even heard that he was sort of worried for himself, even though you would think, I'm super confident that's the speed I'm going to win a race. He's going, yeah, I mean, I can ride that speed. But he's aware that if something goes wrong, I'm hurtling off the track at way faster than normal. And that's unfortunately the byproduct, like you said. So the easier, simpler sections, how do the top guys differentiate themselves? They brake later. They don't touch the brakes. We've heard back in the day, there were certain sections, okay, in the race, can I no brake this section? There's more of those sections going to happen now. So, yeah, it's super interesting. So, yeah, Andy Kolb was, be. So you were going to say?
No, no, carry on, carry on.
Yeah, so like Andy Kolb is a good way to like get into it. So like there's a few storylines for him. He's satisfied, not super stoked on the result, but a top 10 is a great way to start a season at a track
And
that anything could
that's what he
happen,
recognizes.
right?
Yeah, with
Yeah, he
yeah,
recognizes that. He's like,
for,
okay, I'm happy. It's good for my expectations after an injury. And Fort William, you can literally sit out the race like Laurie Greenland. You can have two mechanicals in 2 runs, or
yeah,
you can just have a crash, and you're not even in the final. And that's a horrible way to start the year after all the off-season work. So, people like that getting in the top 10, Matt Walker, you can see how relieved he was. Like, boom, start the season well. He's had horrible results in the past year or two compared to his standard. So you've got all these guys that are like super satisfied. And then the storylines, if we let them unfold, we said, okay, Luca and Troy, what are we going to see from them? Because they're like the consistent guys, but the sport keeps etching up on the topic of Andy Kolb. How do you win a race? Well, you ride 100, 105%, knowing that you could come off. And I think Troy, they probably subconsciously started realizing that. New bike. Apparently, they've been doing a lot of time on that, as you will with a new bike. We've mentioned off season. The minute you get a new bike, it's like going on holiday. Something new, something shiny. Lucas Shaw did a lot of runs on it, and it's paid off. Like, really awesome.
yeah,
I would say those were the question marks. And then a lot of the storylines, like Loic's going to be strong, Finn's going to be strong. Dak's going to maybe
yeah,
break out and win a race. And then that's your
yeah,
podium. Like Loic and
yeah.
Troy, Luca and Troy just said,
It's
we've answered your question, and the rest, we kind of knew it was going to unfold.
yeah, as how we spoke about in the preseason, how we said there's so many different winners. It's almost like what happened this, like in the whole of last year. It almost happened like if you look at quali and semi results to final, especially like semi to final, it was like very little changed. Last year we were having this guy win, this guy, they're coming in all over the show, and like a good average bunch of people getting up there. But now it was almost like watching Formula One. We had like Specialized, the top, the two riders from Specialized and the two riders from Canyon, and they just like were there for both semi and final, and they just switched their positioning up a tiny bit. It's like, whoa, this might be the new normal for this year. But you talked, you just, sorry, we'll jump all over the place with this, but you mentioned something which makes sparks a memory of a conversation I had. And I actually thought I had nothing to really add to this thing, because my brain is so blurred. But you said breaking points, and for William, especially, you're going so fast and the track is so long, so all those little breaking points add up to a lot more than on any other track, just because x amount of corners times how fast you do the corner, that's your race time. And I wanted to find out from Loic, what was it? He's never won here. It's only this track and Val de Sol, the two tracks he's never won. And I didn't realize that about Val de Sol, and they've both been on the circuit for quite some time. So I was like, so why? What happened in all the previous ones? So a lot of Fort William he's come at it from an injury, like come straight after Croatia, or so there's been that. And then there's a few times where he's been caught out, got on the unlucky side of the weather. But the other main things that's hindered his potential race winning here, he says, is braking, inconsistent braking. Okay, so what does that mean? And then what did they do to basically have that not be an issue this race? So he said, when it's wet or sometimes wet or misty at the top, but then dry in the rest of the track, or you got wind and you got puddles, and you got, so for William, you often, it can be wet, and everyone says it's grippier, the dirt is grippier when it's wet. But one thing which I never realized, because when you're riding, when your brakes are wet, your pads or your rotors, your braking is different, right? And as regular riders, this, but you don't really, that just it's part of riding your bike in the wet, especially when you go from dry to wet. When you bed in your brake pads, you can feel when you use water and when you don't use water. So now imagine you're someone like Loic Bruni, going the fastest human being on the face of the earth, and how a tiny bit of, and Greg Minar's one that's super picky about braking as well. And when you're carrying so much speed, and it's all about late braking and braking correctly and having your right amount of braking, if your braking is slightly off, or more importantly, inconsistent. What's that noise? Oh, it's a motorbike. It'll be throw you off your game. So Loic said a lot of his not getting a win here is slightly inconsistent braking. So one of the things they planned for this brake cover that you saw on Loic's bike, and these mountain bikers love to like look like moto and stuff. So I just thought it was along those lines, and it goes to 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 Finn. Okay, so the three of the four guys that I spoke to that were on the podium is all has a similar theme, and how hard they work to fix those problems or those marginal gains. And in Loic's case, braking was an issue why he hasn't won here in the past. And to fix that, they didn't want the brakes getting wet in some places or puddle of mud going there. So that was the point of the sort of brake protector. So if there's little splashes, even though they raced in the almost dry, that was one of the things, and it paid off. Can you say his brakes stayed consistent all the way through the run? Yeah, probably. Did that help his win? Yeah, maybe, because in the past it's cost him the win. And then you go on to who's done the most work, which you spoke about, sort of the Canyon and Finn. Finn is now on the suspension I think Loic has been on earlier last year. So they kind of got a level playing field. And he said him and Kev quite recently had 3 massive days getting the bike dialed. And this is like the full-time year-round work that we don't see. And we only get to see the racing for 5-6 months. But these guys, if you're going to end up on the podium with this first race, they literally have been working, not just on training and stuff, but so close with their mechanics. Even if you watch Troy's vlog, the little things, him, and I never watch vlogs, but at 3 in the morning, you kind of, everyone else has gone to sleep and I'm still editing. So I like, what's new? And I listen to a fucking vlog, and it's Troy and Aaron going back and forth, and these tiny changes that they made on his shock settings, it literally made all the difference to Troy. And those are things that they've worked at, and because they're on new suspension as well, they've had to work at closer to the time. And when me and you, well, not you, because you were more in tune with the product, but when I changed, like I can literally go 2 or 3 clicks of high and low either way, and it still kind of feels the same, and it doesn't affect my speed. But these guys do 1 click of either one, and pressure, or never mind shim stacks, because they're changing those too, and it can mean like literally the difference between a podium run and not a podium run. So when you're at the top end of the pointy sharp end of the stick, it's just is marginal gains. Sorry, that was a bit long.
Love it. Dude, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's why I got you on. I'll wake you up. Now your brain's circulating after lack of sleep. Now we can get going. But
Yes.
so all those things, I think, done correctly, like Loic's braking, right? So they're like, okay, so we've solved that little piece. Like, I think that breeds confidence. I think last year's
Yeah.
result wasn't what his goal at World Champs, but in the dry, Loic was the man to beat. And the weather came in a bit, but inconsistent. But he was noticeably carrying more speed than others. If you watch the broadcast, which maybe you haven't had time,
Mm-mm.
it was so precise that his braking was where it needed to be, and he carried better exit speed. And it was like, the Jackson run at Mount St. Anna was like, that worked out pretty perfectly, because you couldn't fault Troy or Finn's run. And it was just the execution and commitment from Loic, and like the forward momentum was just on another level. And to put that little time gap in, I think little's not really a fair word. That's a pretty decent time gap at the top end of the field, to put into these guys on a track which maybe hasn't suited you, you haven't gelled. And you mentioned this F1 thing. The track, I think, allows that more. Like it's hard to go fast, but it's kind of easy to ride. If you just go down there, like everyone's going to kind of get down the course, right? So that's why I think if you get to qualifying and your track speed isn't up to par, man, it's a tall order to get it up to par. I
Yeah.
think with other tracks, I don't know, just a little bit more commitment here or there, and a little bit more aggression in a steeper track. Like, I don't know. I think you can find time. Like, I think those guys had done the preparation. They came in, and then they set themselves up for success from that very first qualifying run. And it showed, like you said. We're kind of just seeing the same few guys at the top, quali semi-final.
Yeah. Um, always at the end of first day, everyone asks me or the photographers or the people on side track who's looking fast. Now, sometimes if you're like in a super techie, gnarly, rough stuff, you can see who's looking fast. It is visibly different. And normally that would be like sort of an armory that you can notice is visibly quicker or is, just maybe attacking harder. But at Fort Williams, it's like long drawn out sections and you can see quite a lot of it. So it was quite, everyone was looking similar, I would say. But on the first day practice, for the first time, it looked like you just said about forward momentum. It was Troy and Loic that were visibly quicker from the get go on day one. And really, I guess the person that's lifted their game the most would be Troy, because we always would refer to him as the most consistent rider, right, for years and years, but not really in the last 2 years. He's kind of lost that sort of moniker. Um, and now, so obviously that leads me to ask him the question, because I'm curious, like, just like you with the sports psychology, what did you do different? Because now you are sort of a contender, not just a consistent guy to be on the podium. Basically battling Loic for the win, and it's very apparent. Um, so he said basically he boils it down to two things. So for pre last season, I said, did he train better? You train harder? He said, no, he actually trained much harder the year before, but as a result, he rode his downhill bike way less. So he'd like, better gym, more road, like programs and harder. And he said he basically just trained harder but rode his bike less. Now this year they got a new bike, so in order to feel comfortable on the bike and get the bike dialed in, and there's a lot they can change to adjust on this bike, he rode his bike way more, and he said he just felt more comfortable on the bike, and also his whole off-season training, he said, was just a lot more fun because he was riding more. So that made the difference for Troy. You're as good as you are technically, but you can still improve even at someone of Troy and how long he's been by more bike time. And then I do remember you used to have your training schedule and you had something that was called skills. And even though you were off season, you used to dirt jump a lot and ride your trail bike a lot. And a lot of these downhillers get burnt out and they like, it's hard to think because we like all these sports and cycling fans, we mountain bike fans, we don't like put our bike away for 4 months and don't want to ride our bike because that's why we're here. That's why we're listening to this podcast. That was my alarm to wake up, by the way. Fucking hell, I got 2 hours earlier.
Oh, nice.
Um, so, uh, so these guys put their bikes away, but that also can negatively affect them, which Troy's basically admitted. Yeah, he didn't ride his downhill bike enough the year before off season. So yeah, partly the confidence that you gain from riding your bike, like you said, and then they've obviously hit it out the park with the new bike. The bike is very clearly works as well. So it's not just a new bike; it's a new bike that works. And when you go, both team riders go like that, like they did, um, and then you throw in the flight attendant. It's a good mix, isn't it?
It is, and if you look at the podium, Dak had a new bike, new team, so he would have ridden it more. Troy,
Yeah,
Luca, new bike, would have ridden it
new
more.
team.
Troy's
Mm.
noticed maybe that getting burnt out, being away from home, he wants to step away from downhill, kind of like the Greg Minnaar model. That's why he's been able to come back. But Greg Minnaar historically hasn't started the season that well. And that's because he's got less bike time. But then Loic and Finn with a new suspension, riding more, testing more. He's kind of maybe the first person to have the team and the mechanic do an all-round season with testing and riding, where say like Troy getting an Aussie mechanic helps. They can ride a little bit more at home. Gwyn obviously had American mechanics, so when they're testing and doing shuttle runs, it with his mechanic at home. Whereas
Yeah,
in the past, it was like, hey guys, thanks for the good year. We'll chat in 2-3 months. And you get
yeah,
back on the bike and you have 1 or 2 team camps. So, evolution of the sport, they got to have bike time, they got to have their touch and feel. And then that breathes into the results at the first race. Because if you're a little bit
especially
off
the
on your touch
first.
and feel, the first race is so important, especially on a track like Fort William. I mean, you got to know what you're doing there because everything's coming at you so quick. You've almost got to be so subconscious with the timing and the feeling. So that makes a lot of sense. So that was kind of like the podium. Um, Obviously, we called that Dak would be there. He had a thing to prove about his high rise bars. So the internet, I like all the
Man,
memes. There was some hilarious that
those bars,
cigarette
like I
union
still,
UCI weird name on Instagram. I think you shared it.
what's it, tall,
It's
big stack
so
Dak?
funny there, and they had like his coat. Yeah, and that he was on like a
Oh,
chopper, and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
they had like a goat falling off a deck, and then even Greg commented like because the goat went down hard twice. They missed it on the broadcast,
Man.
but he had a big crash before the big one that they saw on telly. So I
So,
mean, that
yes, so
shows like how hard you got to push. Like for Greg to have two crashes, I know the first one probably caused the second one because he said he couldn't lift properly. I wonder if he's got some damage.
talking about, you got, this is a brilliant thing with the sport and with memes in general. Um, on that same union, UCI Cigarette International, I know whose account that is, by the way. It took me about 2 years to find out. It's brilliant. Um, he's got the youngest rider on the field who won, Asa. So first I saw that hip surgery, hip replacement, and I was like, oh, that must be Greg because he's old and he breaks a hip when he falls. But no, it's the youngest rider who literally, this is maybe one of the, I was expecting big things from this kid when I saw him riding in person at West Virginia, and he was without a doubt the fastest guy through sections, as the course sweep, um, at which eventually got kicked off from being court sweep. And then I was like, but he was injured as to the point where a week ago he wasn't sure if he would ride. He hadn't ridden his downhill bike for 5 weeks. He rode his downhill bike for the first time 4 days before the Fort William. Couldn't train because he's had hip surgery. So you got this young little kid having hip surgery, and you got the oldest guy that could break a hip when he falls. Man, and Greg hit the ground hard, and he's like become like the Incredible Hulk because he knows he doesn't have a choice. He's going to get back up and keep going. So what Greg's done is amazing, and to get into that short, not being protected like he was last year to make it in was an accomplishment in himself. And then he obviously was going for it in a big way. But man, that kid, right? So he managed to get like a top 12 elite time at his first ever World Cup, right? And his first year junior, and the first time riding this track, and not training for 5 weeks on a smaller team, not a massive
That's
factory
scary,
team,
eh? That's so
right?
scary.
The stats, what are we going to see from
That's
this kid? Like we're
shocking.
like, you see Jackson Goldstone and you think it's an anomaly, and we're not going to see another Jackson Goldstone in the sport for how many years to come, because like it's very rare that we're going to get skills like this. But as we get older, and all the young kids coming up, they've all got parents like me and you. Speaking of parents, Troy Brosnan is going to join the Dad Club pretty soon here this year. But so of course these kids are just going to get better and better and better, because they're going to have like moto dads like me and you and Sam Hill, like from when like Ziggy's already on the bike and she's 14 months. Of course she's going to be good when she gets to like bloody first year junior.
It's the 10,000 hour rule, my man. You've heard of it.
Hopefully she's into surfing and skateboarding, because I don't know if I can still get free bike stuff when I'm like 60 or 70 and she's wanting like all it. Can you imagine having to get a kid from a 16-inch to a 29-inch, and how many bikes and how much that's going to cost you, and how long you'll have to work for the next God knows how long just to support. Seriously, this is, and I'm complaining it's expensive now. I don't even really pay for stuff.
You don't
Except
even pay for it now. It don't even look like it's horrific, man. I see it in the bike shop. I'm like, wow, we're so lucky. But yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
so
it's
that kid, man, his
literally is a
run,
kid, eh?
yeah, and his run, he played it super well, because I heard the commentary or the on-course commentators like, oh, he's just kind of cruising, and I was like, oh, he's not cruising. He just looks like he's cruising and having fun with it, and then he just like laid it down, and that other Parfit that had an incredible time as a local kid. Oh yeah, no, the junior racing was great to see, and the new, anyway. But yeah, we still got big things to come from that kid, because wait till he is like, you get him a proper NAR track, super tech, and when he's actually in peak condition, I just can like imagine Nico Mullally, like the amount of like buyout offers and how he's going to try, because I'm sure he's signed for more than 1 year, and how the offers are going to do, like how much is he going to be offered to buy out of his contract, and at
You,
what point does Mullally either
you
bring
know
in
what?
big
You know
outside
what?
money to make his team big, because that's what he needs to do. Let's get some
Yeah, yeah.
pharmaceutical
No,
company
yeah, yeah.
and like
You you know what we need? Like with Yeti used to do the development program, and there's a few teams. They should say, like, when you sign a rider, then the team that poaches him, well, like buying out of contract
mm,
something else, but you should get a bonus for being the team that developed him. They do it in soccer, right? If you sign a kid, then
yeah,
it's like an exit clause. I'm butchering the name, but my mate's like does a bit of agency at home, and like if
yeah,
you sign the soccer kid for the amount of years you've had him, and then he goes on to be pro, you get back paid some of that money. You get a percentage for developing the kid. I don't know the correct terminology, but you could think, okay, we've developed this kid for 2 years. Someone's gonna offer him so much money that the team can't match. He should have like, like it's not like
yeah, for
another
sure.
year on the contract, but they should say, okay, well, there's a signing bonus for taking him away from us, whatever it is, because then
No,
that
100%
would
agree.
incentivize people to develop younger talent, knowing that they're going to let them go, but then the team
Yeah,
or whoever takes them has to pay them like, a couple grand or whatever it is. That would be pretty cool.
yeah,
I don't know how
yeah.
we
And on the
start that, but that would be sick.
and I think that is pretty much going to start happening now anyway. And on the flip side, I am pretty proud of companies that do spot and nurture and develop a first year junior into second, and if he doesn't end up performing or delivering, they don't just kick him to the curb on first year elite, even though they know he's going to get totally smoked. um, so hats off to the couple of big factory teams that have like sort of still committed to the rider for 1 year, not just sign a 2 year junior deal and see how you go, and then we'll re-sign you, and give him that third sort of thank you year on elite to see if he finds his feet. But yeah, so that's going to be super exciting to watch. And then the same can be said in the junior women's as well, with a couple of first years coming out, getting on the podium in their first race. Joe Bowman's girl. Uh, and yeah, where are we at? Sorry,
I think
my
no. I
brain
think
is not
it's
working.
but it's a good time to maybe get a bit of structure. So we've done the podium in the men's.
Yeah.
Maybe we do some like
Oh, hang
notables,
on.
and then if you have funny stories, go for it. But I got a
Well,
hard
yeah, I
out
think
today, so we can't go on for 4 hours.
yeah, yeah.
Noticeable,
Oh, the podium,
notables.
the podium for the podium for the men's, Greg Williamson, like, and is like, I spoke to him after the race. I'm like, dude. And he says, I didn't do anything special. I rode like I know I can ride. I'm like, well, you need to figure out how to do this on every track. Because, like, if you think you can ride like this, because yes, he's a local and he knows the track inside out. But I said to him, dude, everyone's a local now because the whole World Cup's been here the last few weeks. And like half the World Cup, it's opening weekend in Leogang this weekend. And I guarantee you, go take a look at people's Instagrams, but next weekend, you've got half the World Cup going to be sitting in Leogang because it's become the new normal of getting comfortable and up to speed and track time. And yeah, if you're looking for some World Cup spotting, go opening
Oh
weekend in
God,
Leogang this weekend.
no. Oh, I hate that. Anyway, I'm not even going to get
Mm.
a rant going on whether we should close tracks. Obviously, somewhere like Fort William needs the income, and for Leo Games a bike park, but close some of the sections. I don't know
Nevis,
what you can do, but there's got to be a way.
Nevis
Ben
Range.
Nevis is a
So
little bit tough to do that.
they
But let's not
asked
go on that rant. We've
the use
ranted that
the
so
no no
often.
no no no
Yeah.
no the UCI, oh sorry, Warner Brothers asked them to close the track at Nevis Range. Like, this is our loss of income and how much you're going to pay us to close the track. And they're like, yeah,
they
okay,
said,
leave the track
ignore
open.
the. Yeah, no, I
Ignore
hear you.
that.
I'd probably say the same thing. But yeah, so Williamson, six of his top tens have come from Fort William. I haven't actually looked into where the rest are from.
And
That's
and I
including
guess
Wolves. So
other
he obviously goes well there, which is
yeah,
incredible for him. Reese Wilson did it the hard way. So that was awesome to see him back, and that's a
dude,
stellar
he's
result. He
right.
said he almost
He's
felt like he jumped the beam, so he was in a weird headspace. He
oh, like
probably
went
did
too
the
early.
most time. Well, not time. Yeah, I think so. But obviously that didn't affect him.
You,
He was worried he was going to get DQ'd. And
you know
then
what
he
that
also had a red flag. So he had like a really tough day the day before. So I think that's
yeah.
cool to see him back. We need riders like that back, and it's cool that he made it into the main event after such a long time off. So that shows that the speed's there on a rough, brutal track.
Dude, he's such a legend. Like he, man, he literally doesn't need to do some of the stuff he's doing. He's such like a bike rider's bike rider. And what I mean by that, he's like super professional to his craft, and to get back to be competitive and race again. And, he didn't even know if that would happen, through multiple different injuries. But then there's a couple of things on this track that only he was doing. There's always that guy, it used to be like Remy Tiron at that first Andorra track or second Andorra track, doing some of the Remy lines. There's literally track lines here, and not just because it's Fort William. There's Reese lines. There's one like sort of just before you get to the woods and you finish the top section, there's like a double compression, which you can't gap. And it ended up only being him and Danny. And I'm like, is it faster? He says like, hell no, it's the same, but it's also sketchier because you land into the next section too fast and you can get blown by the wind. And I'm saying, yeah, but will you do it? It's not necessary to do it. He says, yeah, of course I'm going to do it because it feels funner. And there's another section in the woods where you could double another compression, and it wasn't faster, but it just looked way sicker and way cooler. And he was also like doing it, and he's like literally one of the guys that's like literally using a downhill bike to the nth of the degree. A lot of the other lines and gaps you can do on an enduro bike on these World Cup tracks, but some of the stuff that Reese is doing, you 100% need a downhill bike, and you can't do it on an enduro bike. Although Martin Mays can do it on an e-bike, which has been proven.
I was going to wait till the end of the podcast. I can't believe I haven't brought Martin Mays up, because you love giving me shit about the enduro riders coming back. But I didn't see no Jack Moyer, and I didn't see no Richie Rude, but we did see Martin Mays. Oh, that's my dog. He's home. And he literally comes with a bastardized e-bike without a motor, and he hasn't ridden a downhill race for 2 years, and slots himself in the top 20 or top 25.
Twice.
Dude, the talent. Yeah. He's give him a downhill ride, man. Let's see him another whole full season on a downhill ride.
I think he was promised a downhill bike by year 2 or something. So I don't necessarily think he wants to be out there on that bike. Maybe, yeah. Anyway,
cool storylines. Yeah, that's a cool notable. Cool. We've mentioned Greg.
And then I think Greg
Minar's crashes on gnarly. Hang on.
Yeah,
but doesn't Greg look a little bit more lively on the bike? Speaking of Reese Wilson, lively. Like, I think he's adapting his riding style again. Like this, I wonder in the tracks that are a little bit more technical.
It's good for him, but sure. Those were big crashes. Yeah. Greg will be ice bathing and hot tubbing it the next week, I imagine.
Call them what you want. Knee knockers, golden nuggets, thigh slappers. But our friends at Manscaped refer to them as the boys. Not every man has children, but every man is responsible for their 2 boys below the waist. When your little guys have more hair than they need, trust Manscaped for your grooming dreams. So join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com and use code MOVINGTHENEEDLE for 20% off and free shipping. You heard it here first. The boys are back in town. Now picture this. You're shredding down the gnarliest of trails, feeling the wind in your hair, and then it hits you. You need to tame the beast below the belt. That's where Manscaped comes in. With their cutting-edge technology and precision engineering, you can now groom with confidence, just like you conquer those downhill descents. You know what they say, look good, feel good, and ride good. Every man knows how scary it can get when they're going for a close shave below the waist. That's why I trust Manscaped for all my sensitive areas. Introducing the Lawnmower family, now including the Lawnmower 3.0 Plus, the 4.0 Pro, and the 5.0 Ultra. Yep, you heard it. That's 3 ball trimmers. Isn't that awesome? Boys need love too, and for this reason, each trimmer is equipped with skin-safe technology, an LED spotlight, and unique features for different grooming needs. Oh, and these babies are waterproof too. Need I say more? For the basic trim, why don't you go with the 3.0 and work your way up to the 4.0 and then the 5.0 for the ultimate grooming experience. Taking it on the go, you ask? Manscaped has you covered. These trimmers come with a travel case and even a travel lock feature, so avoid any accidental powering and or weird looks in that airport. Now get 20% off and free shipping, as I said, with the code moving the needle at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus your free shipping with the code moving the needle at manscaped.com. For the best your boys have ever looked, you got to trust Manscaped. Other noticeable, Ronan Dunn continues his consistency. It's a good start to the season. The other guys in the top 15, that sort of stuff. Benoit Coulange, like silent again, just sneaks
Dude, he
into the
was so
top
quick.
10.
He was so
You know,
quick, so quick, so quick. Like he was after the Troy and Loic. He looked more like Omri quick, where it was like it could go wrong at any time. And usually Ben was a bit smooth and say Omri, but he looked like and he just missed the podium. But he's definitely going to be contender all year. And then I guess the biggest discussion is we've seen Omri back. He wouldn't be happy with his P, where his result. But he's missed a whole year, as did Pom Pom. And I think in my book, what I'm thinking, I think this is a win or a definite result for him to get this first one out the way at Fort William, and to be, he's fast. Obviously his position 15th is a bad result for him. But I think this would be the hardest one, being the first one and at Fort William, and he's getting bike time again. And I think from here on out, he can probably like have a bit of a sigh of relief and then crack on, and then just we'll see Omri. I'll predict he'll have wins this year for sure.
I think that's a really good statement. I think it's like, he's got to unfortunately take the steps of the ladder. He's not as young as he was. There's probably some mental trauma from that crash, as well as physically. I think it was way worse than we even know,
Yeah.
and that's hard to bounce back from. Obviously, we spoke about Asa, like, was meant to be out for 12 weeks, got a new doctor to say, oh, maybe we'll take x-rays every 2 weeks, and the guy's back in 7 weeks. Like, it's just different. So I think it's awesome. It's smart. We have to see Amari back. It's great to have him at the races. He's still got that aggression in his race run. So that was pretty cool. Danny Hart, not a bad start, not an amazing start, but, considering the last year wasn't where he would want to be, and then these team changes, and like the internet wants to see him back. So that was cool on a new bike as well. So there's all the guys that like, okay, you know what? Worst case, I'll take that. Loris Vergier, maybe he would have probably wanted a little bit more, but considering the time gaps are pretty close, he's second or two from the podium, which would be a really good start. And he slotted into 8th, so things like that you just got to take. Obviously, there's really nothing you can really do. The Meyer Smith brothers, they're fast. They were fast.
8th through 10th, literally one tiny mistake or one not pushing somewhere super hard. 8th through 10th is literally, that's you're sorry, Andrew. You're literally 8th through 10th. You can be on the podium 100%. It's just one
always.
other thing
and
has to happen in your run.
That's what we worked on, with Giant. Like when we were getting those 7th, 8th, 9th, and Oscar was just like, "Hey, just keep doing that. There's going to be a race where you are then 5th. Like there's not. You don't have to do much different, But maybe we shift over to the ladies, and if we forgot something, we'll do it at the end. But Sven, do you know that Vali won the race on the motorway?
Yeah, we had a good
that's like training and experience and really impressive. I wouldn't have bet that Vali wins it there. I thought she'd win it all the way to the motorway and then maintain.
So there's two things there, because I spoke to Vali and Nina, and I was like, okay. I would have really put your guys' splits the other way around.
Yep.
And Vali said she rode a bit messy and like made some mistakes, a couple, and maybe she can still afford to make a few mistakes where not everyone else can. And then I said to Nina, like I expected Nina to be just lay down the power, being more powerful than Vali. So I said to Nina, like this, like between the two of you guys kind of confuse me. But then again, let's not forget, Vale has the best scrub whip. She can squash and ride jumps perfectly. Now, Nina said maybe the skin, she basically, she can power more, but she said she's a bit like, can you imagine all of training, hitting jumps, right? You're never really going to sprint as fast as you humanly can go and then hit a steeper than last year, a steeper lip. It's like, I guess you have to be comfortable doing speed and style to sprint that fast into jumps on the motorway. And Nina's just said there's literally one jump where she just overcleared it, and she said, "Is it the skin suit? Is it the what is it?" But she said basically that's it for her. Like if she could have just squashed one of the jumps better, she wouldn't have lost that time. And then hats off to Vale, and hats off to all those girls because they each other's biggest competitors, and they go to these cool like islands. I forget which ones they go to, but they do all these like road camps in the winter. And these are girls that are battling for podiums and wins, and they're all training together. So it's pretty cool to see the camaraderie amongst the girls, and they're keeping it fun on their off-season training camps. And but Vale is definitely she's like loves a new team, and she definitely would have put down like she's super powerful rider when it comes to throwing down the pedals as well. Yeah, so yeah, like you said, you wouldn't have the result with Nina and Vale. It's going to be. I just think it's, and then Tane being in the mix with her taking one of the wins. It's going to be. Vale sort of can maybe be a bit more confident, but now the other Nina and Tane can definitely see that they can definitely beat Vale. So yeah, and this is what we predicted. I think the women's racing is maybe going to be more exciting than the men's, and it's going to be as exciting for sure. And they've definitely shown that we need 15 women next year. We needed it this year, we needed it last year, but 100% to go from to cut it down to 15. Who Pom Pom didn't even make it in, so she's going in her quali run. And she's like had finally back to racing, and then a mistimed injury in Queenstown, just like Annie Colbert, his mistimed injury in Queenstown. Anyway, she was in her run pushing hard, and then she's like, oh, hang on, I've got to race again this afternoon. I'm going to ease back and save a bit, because she in her head knows what a top 10 time is. And when she crossed the line, she's like, yeah, that's a top 10 time. And she was 16th. And she said in 1 year, her that margin used to be a top 10, and now it's like not even top 15. So yeah, so then to cut that 15 down to 10 for the final, yeah, not acceptable really. Yeah. Sorry, my answers are so long-winded that I forget what the question was by the end of it.
There's not always a question. That's why we just go, and it's great. But no, the storylines, unfortunately, was like, where would Miriam be? And you've just answered that. She might have misjudged it, might not have been as fit with that ill-timed injury. Like, what a bummer. But she'll bounce back. She's not going to make that mistake again. But
She looked good.
Tane
She
being
looked
back,
really good.
but Tane, that's aggressive. Like, as you spoke, we said in the hardline review, that'll probably give her some confidence. It was smart that she maybe sat out the race, but that's going to give her confidence. She's had a full off season. There's the new bike. There's the speed suit that, Loic wishes he looked as sexy as Tane could look in a speed suit, but that's why he doesn't have a speed suit. So we're at the point where, yeah, it's not just Valley's to lose. It's like these other ladies could lose it as well in terms of like they can win a race. It's not like Valley has to mess up for them to win a race. We knew she'd be strong. We knew Valley would be strong, but Nina showed that on that track, it really suits her. Tane is only going to build confidence. And then Cami just silently sneaking onto the podium. I think the nice calculated ride. And then I'm sure you've got a lot to say with Gloria. I mean, surprised or not surprised. Like, I don't think I'm surprised. She was so strong and fit down the bottom. It was like, she was great. No surprise the way she rode. From the enduro scene, like she's going to be strong and fit to get through this new format as well.
Yeah, like so she comes from a track racing background and showed her like her skills in mountain biking, and then she had offers. She had offers from pro road teams to race for them professionally with a bigger paycheck than she was getting counter offered to race enduro a couple of years ago for Canyon Pirelli. And then when she got bumped to downhill, then obviously Fabian is going to do like a crazy amount of work with her, which like could you have a better mentor or skills coach. TJ Smith, Film Smith Media. We had all these crazy bets. Well, on the next show, we'll get a list of some of the craziest bets because we bet on anything.
And can I get in
Um,
on it along the way? Hey, I want in on it.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
want in on it along the
We'll
way.
yeah, because
Yeah,
it's
and
usually a
then we'll
track.
do our own little betting.
Usually track walk day. We do some crazy. Anyway, I wanted to actually place her in the back of my head. I said to him, I want to call Gloria for the first, like her first. Basically, I called her for the podium before on track walk, and then I didn't have the balls to basically commit to that bet in monetary terms. So I lost out there. The one bet I did say, I said the winning margin would be less than 1.5. But then I
In the
also did say
ladies.
it would be like, yeah. But I did also say it would be Loic or Charlie that would win. But I didn't put that bet on paper. So I lost money to TJ, but I won money somewhere else if I get my other bet. But one of the interesting things, and this can apply to everyone, I wonder if I should say, yeah, I'll say it. Overheard. Maybe I won't say to which athlete it was to, because it could be one of like maybe 10. But Fabian, and was someone that ended up on the podium this weekend, and Fabian Burrell basically said the race starts on track walk, and we're not talking about taking your lines, but it's arriving in Scotland, or if the weather's bad, or you've had shitty travel, or the midges are attacking you, or you're eating fried food, or whatever it is. Your mental space and your how positive or negative or up or down you are. He said the race begins on track walk, and if you carry that attitude or that over the rest, it's going to affect your whole week. So change your mental approach. And yeah, I won't say the athlete that he was talking to, because I don't know. Maybe I don't know why him or her was maybe not super positive on that day, but they ended up on the podium. So yeah, Fabian's, he might know everything about tech and lines, but he's also knows the bigger picture as well.
I think we got it pretty nailed. I thought you'd have a good go on the speed suit. I read the rule. Did you read the rule? Like Fox got
It's
around it
two
by
piece.
making it a
It's
two
two
piece.
piece.
It's like it's
Yeah,
genius.
brilliant.
So it's full
Mm.
on basically a skin suit. I'm like watching like it's kind of a skin suit. So I don't really care. Like I don't race anymore. So
Mm.
innovation is cool. The riders are not kicking up too much of a fuss. To be honest, like how is that not a skin suit? Like I don't know what
It.
rules UCI is
I
going
mean,
off.
you know
Not
what?
the no, not the two
It,
piece thing. Like everything's
yeah.
so tight anyway. So like it's pretty hard to have like a solid set of rules, which I think Loic
You're
brought up.
frozen
They're
on
going to
me,
have to
Andrew.
figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, but everyone was riding such tight fitting lycra stuff the last couple of years. It literally hardly makes a difference. I would say, if anywhere, it would make a difference here. The only other things, smallest crowds we've had in Fort William possibly ever. New organizers.
Really,
I don't know. Did they promote the event as well? Finish area was tweaked and changed. Some things it was like a step up, massive big screens and stuff. But I thought the layout was a bit quirky for crowds and for photography. It wasn't as awesome. Sadly, the crowds weren't like super close to the track because there was overhead flyer cams, which is good for the broadcast. Otherwise, some stuff is pretty cool. Like now, it's the second year of the guys putting these races together, and it was a lot of some clearer communication paths and something. So there's definitely progress in some things, and then other things. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. It was job done. Eh? How was the live
well,
feed? How did it look? I didn't even know.
no, it was good, dude. I mean, like you say, like it's the second year, so there's always improvement. There's always room for improvement. So no, I thought it was good. Obviously, they got together a broadcast list, probably maybe later than we thought, but it's there. I was able to watch it in South Africa, Aussies, all those people. If you're sort of a core fan, you can research, you can get that. Let me know in the comments or Instagram if I missed that there's an app. So I use the Stay Live streaming service in my country. Everyone else probably has an app. I don't think there was an app, but you obviously just do it
You
online.
can.
So we got to watch the
I think
racing. I support it. I'll pay for it. Like that to me's, I'm going to get into the weeds with that. Like it just is
yeah.
what it is. And I like the racing enough. So it's all good.
I mean, everything good these days you pay for, and pay per view. It's if you're a fan of the sport, $6-10. It's price of two coffees to watch like the world's best racing. There's nothing. And if you really can't, you just go to Pink Bike, and usually the first comment is like the couple of illegal live feed links. You can use that.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. All right, this episode we have on Hard Out. Sven's been kindly
Can I go?
asked to check out. So that was thanks to Sven Martin. And this was your Crank Brothers race review. As I've said, synonymous with downhill racing, clean sweeping the men's and women's there. They've won 13 world championships in a row with that Mallet DH pedal. They're adding to their product offering. They had Lucas Shaw, Troy Brosnan, Camille Belange on the podium in those shoes. So make sure you go check them out. They're always coming out with super cool colors that I can't even get my hands on, because I think you awesome listeners are purchasing them all, or Sven's ordered them before me. That's Sven with the cheers. And till the next one, you guys know what to do. Share it with a friend. Get us some comments on the YouTube, and make sure, if you like visual podcasts, you can search Moving the Needle podcast in YouTube. So yeah, thanks to you guys. We'll see you in the next one.